Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you here today with an article from Human Events. And I think everybody saw in the last couple of weeks or so from when this is going to air that the Canadian Parliament had an actual Nazi that was applauded by them. And then they're trying to walk it back like, oh, wait, yeah. So I just wondered what it was about that. I thought this was a bit more in depth than just a regular article. So I was waiting to see something like this before I commented on what happened in there. So this article says the left moves from punch a Nazi to, well, it's complicated in defense of Ukraine's Nazi past. And this article is from October 4th. Again, Human Events doing it. So let us go through this. It says the case of Yaroslav Honka, and that was the guy that the Canadian Parliament applauded. So it's never going to end well for Ukraine flag and biotypes. Having spent years treating the war in Ukraine as an existential struggle against Hitler 2.0, and being apparently more than willing to censor and even assassinate those who disagree, we can more than imagine the cognitive dissonance they must have felt upon discovering that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in praising what he thought was a Ukrainian patriot, had in fact been praising a former Waffen SS officer. And it's an SS officer who, by the way, Poland is now attempting to extradite so they can try him for war crimes he may have committed. And by the way, the Waffen was a part of a German World War II military group, and maybe this article will actually go into that. But yeah, they had to swear allegiance to funny mustache German guy during World War II, and they're responsible for some legit atrocities. So yeah, they were applauding an actual Nazi soldier. Good job, Canadian Parliament. Says we are not naive enough to believe the institutional left has a sense of shame, but among average non-professional liberals, you'd think that the discovery of an actual living, breathing Nazi in Ukraine's ranks might have caused some cognitive dissonance for people who, until recently, imagined themselves as Marvel's Captain America punching out Adolf Hitler, which is an actual comic book cover. You should go look at it. It actually is a really good cover. Says in Canada, at least that may be the case, seeing as people are now asking if maybe there shouldn't be a monument to Hunka's SS unit on Canadian soil since the SS were, in charge of the Holocaust. And if those questions keep up, maybe they'll also get around to asking just why Russia proclaimed that its mission in the invasion was to denazify Ukraine in the first place, or why Ukraine's most mentally ill former spokespeople call entire races natural slaves, or call for the execution of critics when they think no one's listening, which their spokesperson actually did. Says why homegrown Nazi domestic terrorists tried to run off to join Ukraine's infamous Azov battalion, who, by the way, are Nazis. Like, Ukraine does have a very serious Nazi past. So the left is basically gone, as the article headline says, from punch a Nazi to no, no, no. These are the good ones. We should support them. Okay, idiots. Says all of which is to say that panic has clearly set in among the liberal foreign policy establishment, who are now desperately trying to stuff this narrative violation under the rug. Given this panic and disorientation, it was only a matter of time before some self-proclaimed expert tried to wave the whole thing away with an explanation that was not merely absurd, but morally grotesque as well. So let's go ahead and see who the moron is going to be. Enter British writer Keir Giles of the Conflict Studies Research Center. Writing at Politico, which is a garbage rag, says Giles offers a take, which we can only describe as the equivalent of trying to douse a fire after one has mistaken gasoline for water. What was that take? We honestly can't improve on the ghoulish absurdity of Giles's willingly chosen headline. It says fighting against the USSR didn't necessarily make you a Nazi. Yes, he really wrote that, and Politico actually ran it. Right. And that's not it. Amidst the fetid swamp of wow, what's that word? Casuistry. Okay, I've never seen that before. Sophistry and denial of literal historical atrocities, and we'll get back to that. That is Giles' argument. You find this gem. Oh, not putting that out. It says, quote, fighting against the USSR at the time didn't necessarily make you a Nazi, just someone who had an excruciating choice over which of these two terror regimes to resist. So in other words, being a literal SS officer was fine, so long as you only joined them because you thought the commies were worse. And who were the people that fought against Russia in World War II? It was the Nazis. So it quite literally made you a Nazi if you were fighting against them. But okay, people on the left. Says not to fall into the simple narratives that is so desperate to avoid, but by his standard, Adolf Hitler himself could arguably let off the hook for his original attraction of fascism. After all, anyone unfortunate enough to read Mein Kampf will know that Hitler started off as an anti communist who became a raging anti Semite when he reached the incorrect conclusion that communism was somehow an extension of Judaism. Shall we now excuse Hitler for his atrocities because at least he had the good taste to invade the evil Russians, which is apparently a moral good because we've always been at war with East Asia? Nice 1984 reference. Actually, given the rest of Giles' piece, we're not sure we want him to answer that. Which brings us to the whole denial of atrocities thing. For example, Giles writes, repeated exhaustive investigations, including by not only the Nuremberg trials but also the British, Canadian, and even Soviet authorities, led to the conclusion that no war crimes or atrocities have been committed by Hunke's particular unit. I somehow doubt that. So let's see here. It says, someone tell it to Heinrich Himmler, who personally praised Hunke's unit, the SS Galiciana unit, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, for the willingness to slaughter Poles. But yeah, no war crimes or atrocities. So no wonder Poland's trying to get him back, and hope they do. Does someone tell the between 500 and 1,000 Polish civilians murdered in the Huda Kieniaka massacre, and sorry again, butchered that, with the assistance of the SS, that word I can't pronounce correctly. Does someone tell the Jewish organizations that are still fighting to get monuments to SS, I'm going to do it again, Gallicina, removed not only in Canada, but here in the US? But no, you see, Giles has an answer to that last point, namely attacking Simon Wiesenthal. What? One of the most famous Holocaust survivors and Nazi hunters to ever live. Yeah, there's like an HBO movie they made like 30 years ago based on this dude. Was it Ben Kingsley maybe that played him or something? Maybe Ben Kingsley played him in something else. But yeah, Simon Wiesenthal was a dude that was like, you ain't getting away from him. He's gonna find your ass if you were a former Nazi, bring your ass in. Because in fact, Giles writes, during previous investigations of Uncas unit carried out by a Canadian Commission of Inquiry, Simon Wiesenthal himself was found to have made broad accusations that were found to be nearly totally useless and put the Canadian government to a considerable amount of purposeless work. Yes, that silly old Nazi hunter, such a kidder. How long, we wonder, before some enterprising liberal hawk decides to just out and embrace Holocaust denial? Okay, except for Whoopi Goldberg. Yeah, because Whoopi is not an actual Jew, so isn't she cultural appropriating? Ironically, in making this vile and morally obtuse argument, Giles is actually falling prey to a similar tendency that he actually correctly calls out. Says Russia feels comfortable shouting about Nazis, real or imaginary, in Ukraine and elsewhere because, unlike Nazi Germany, leaders and soldiers of the Soviet Union were never put on trial for their war crimes. Hunka writes, Russia clings to the Nuremberg trials as a benchmark of legitimacy because, as a victorious power, it was never subjected to the same reckoning. That's actually true. As in short, because the Nuremberg trials were carried out by the victorious Allies, Stalin's own bloodthirst got a free pass. And yeah, if anybody tried to put the Soviets on trial, Stalin would have just killed them. So there's that too. So as much ironically as the exact treatment that Giles himself is now trying to extend to Ukraine, only this time, instead of communist butchers, it's Nazi butchers who get to reap the benefits of not only excuses for their past crimes, but willful ignorance of their present day behavior. Not because they actually are less evil, but simply because Giles and his fellow members of the foreign policy blob are determined to protect anyone who they see as aiding their post Cold War grudge match against the great Russian enemy. And yes, the key word there is Russian. Apparently, the liberal establishment also thinks attacks on communism are dirty lies, so long as the communists being attacked are Chinese. Just ask the Washington Post. Nice little dig again. Says William F. Buckley once famously compared liberals to Don Quixote because both, despite seeing themselves as self appointed heroic knight errants, were actually just nuisances who tilted at windmills and attacked terrified civilians. But unfortunately, if Giles' article is any guide, even Buckley's description was too kind. Don Quixote, after all, at least tried to follow the code of chivalry, whereas today's liberals see themselves as the fons et origo of morality. If we are the good guys, and therefore what we say is good, and what we say is good, and what we say is bad is bad. It's less a moral vision than the elevation of main character syndrome to the status of mass psychosis. That's a really good line too. Here, let me get rid of that video. It's just distracting. But yeah, and that's what I felt about liberals as well. Is just we're the good guys, or whatever we say is good, so everybody else must be the bad guys. And it's like you guys need to look in a mirror badly. So the article continues says, and like all political mass psychosis, including both Nazis and communism, it can only be undone once the world finally glimpses its pure, shrieking irrationality. We could not have asked for a better example of that irrationality than Kieran Giles' article, because with it, the entire fake leftist moral infrastructure comes crashing down. It's easy to sell people on the notion that a rival political party are Nazis and we should punch Nazis. It's much harder to make anyone swallow the notion that all Republicans are Nazis and we should punch Nazis unless they're actual Nazis, who may be patriots if they're fighting communists, unless the communists are Chinese, or for that matter, unless they're American, like the people who came up with this nonsense to begin with. Yeah, so it's been a little bit since this situation happened, but what did you guys think about this when it happened? That the Canadian government was actually, saying to this guy, it's actually this dude right here, not Zelensky, this guy, because Zelensky's Jewish. Um, what do you guys think about that? What do you think about the Canadian government saying, "Hey, applaud this dude. Oh, he's an actual Nazi, but no, he's fighting Russians. So yay, there's clapping. Yay, we're gonna cheer for him." Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.